Hey guys, welcome back to Tennis 360, the podcast where we talk about all things tennis. My name's Anthony Hirsch.
And I'm Eliza Westgate.
And we just had the conclusion of the 2024 Australian Open. Jannik Sinner and Aryna Sabalenka are our champions in this tournament. They get it done. Jannik Sinner comes back from 2 sets to love down against Daniil Medvedev. Medvedev faces his second heartbreak in the final of the Australian Open in 3 years, and which is frustrating. And Aryna Sabalenka 2 sets over Zheng. So I think we can start from the men's final. And what were your thoughts on the chaos? And what do you think of Sinner's first major final? And did you think that he really stepped up to the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think before the tournament, I would have said that him winning the Australian Open maybe was a little bit premature. But I think in hindsight, we look back at his performance over the last 5 to 6 months, and I think we can really begin to see a pattern emerging that would, show evidence that he really has been the top player on the tour, especially from sort of September, October onwards of last year, was really starting to display a level that we hadn't yet seen from him. And I guess my question marks originally was like, does he still have that? Is he able to do that on a Grand Slam stage in best of 5? And can he be consistent in that way? And he has proven that he can be. He had such an impressive win over Novak Djokovic. I mean, I felt like that semifinal was so comprehensive in a way that took me by surprise, especially given their last couple of matches. I obviously know he had it in him to beat him, but he was just so on it in every way. I thought that semifinal was probably the turning point for Jannik's mentality and that self-belief that he could win that final, even being in a situation when he was 2 sets to love down. And he also did himself such huge favors by getting to the final by only dropping 1 set on his way there. And I think ultimately that is probably one of the biggest factors that, impacted the outcome of the result in the end.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the attention is on the final, but I think that semifinal was definitely a key because it was Djokovic's first loss since 2018. It was the big moment. Djokovic, in fact, never lost in his whole career in the semifinal and final stage Australian Open. He was 10-0 from that point on in terms of winning the title from the semifinal. And all around, I mean, the first 2 sets, 6-1, 6-2, despite what you think of Novak's level, Novak just won 3 out of the 4 majors last year. The fact they could beat him 6-1, 6-2 is crazy to me. And I think that we need to kind of respect the kind of things that Jannik is doing against Djokovic, which is he didn't face a single break point in that semifinal match, which had not happened in Djokovic's entire career at a major, which is just so strange and ridiculous. So to me, it's like to me, it's a thing of Sinner is the young guy who, to me, the most has shown up against Djokovic and been like, I can beat you at the biggest stage. I can do things that nobody else is doing, coming back from 3 consecutive match points down, beating him in the big moments and in Australia. And I guess the question marks are on Novak losing to his 2 consecutive majors, that his 2 best majors. But I think that I think Novak will be back. I think it was good for tennis, honestly, that we got somebody else in the mix. I think for that kind of unpredictability factor, because we were watching Sinner in this early matches. We were like, can he really go all the way? Djokovic is still in the draw, but it doesn't matter for Sinner. Djokovic is in the draw or not. That was a big match. And then, that semifinal match, I mean, in the first 2 sets, Sinner was completely off his game. I mean, Medvedev was just net rushing. He was playing aggressive. He was not how he usually is, just an extraordinary level from Medvedev, and Sinner was hitting lots of errors. I recall in the second set, he had just 9 winners to 14 errors. That would change in the last few sets where he hit, in the first 2 sets, he had a combined total of 22 errors to just, I think it was like 30 errors to like 20 winners. In the last 2 sets, 37 winners, like 15 errors. I mean, it was completely different story in the last 3 sets. I felt like in the first 2 sets, he was the one being pushed back by Daniil, who was really moving forward inside of the court. And it was Jannik who was finding himself out of position. And it was really good to see that Jannik was able to turn it around. Daniil ran out of legs, the longest run for a man ever in major history. So shout out to Daniil. What a heartbreaker once again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's normal for Sinner to come out into his first slam and maybe not be 100% on it in the first set, but I actually think most of the credit there does go to Daniil by coming in with a game plan that Sinner probably didn't anticipate him coming in so aggressively, and net rushing in the way that he was and being able to execute in that way. And I think if we look at Medvedev's performances in general in this slam run, I think what's impressed me so much about him is his ability to play different, tactics and different styles of tennis, even though he's one of those people who we're so used to associating with one style. We saw in this tournament that he was willing to mix up his return position, coming into the net more. He said he worked a lot more on his volleying and not just taking a second serve and kind of getting the point started for neutral, but actually attacking. And I think that's what he did so well against Sinner, was really not letting him get any freebies off of the second serve in those first two sets. And I think it was almost like, if you compare it to a boxing analogy, Sinner took one on the chin and was kind of still dazed in the second set, trying to figure out what he needed to do. And from Medvedev's perspective, I know he said he was getting tired, and that's kind of why the match slipped away from him in the third and the fourth and the fifth. But I'm curious if that's really the case, because it feels like in the third he started to revert back to the usual Medvedev tactics that we're used to seeing, which is the longer baseline rallies, which is, getting into these sort of longer points. And it's like, if your legs are gone from you, I would have thought you would continue with this sort of kamikaze tactic of like, I'm just going to go big on everything. And I wonder if there was a little bit of sort of remnants of scar tissue from the previous final that he lost from 2-0 up against Nadal, if that kind of starts to creep in at any point, if he's not able to execute this sort of all out attack type of strategy from a mental perspective because he's so exhausted. I think that can also be a factor too. It's like you're just so mentally tired. Sometimes it's hard to continue to do differently than what you're used to. And in the end, I also think Sinner made the appropriate adjustments to bother Daniil by adding a little bit more shape, adding a little bit more variety from the baseline, and not giving Medvedev so many kind of consistent hard rally balls, which we know Medi deals well with. So, I think it's particularly heartbreaking because they're two characters that a lot of us love and cherish on the tour and are excited about to see, challenge the top dogs. And I think Medvedev, obviously this one will really hurt, but I sincerely think, based off of what we saw from him this tournament, that he will be in and around the Grand Slam finals again, that he's proven he can come back from, deficits and difficult situations. I think we can talk a little bit about his match against Zverev, where he was again able to come back from 2-0. And so I think he just, in the next slam will need to be super focused on taking care of how much court time he has in the lead up and not getting himself into these situations where he is facing deficits. And part of that may also have been due to the fact that he didn't have too much of a preseason, and he kind of admitted in the press conference in his first round match that he was starting to cramp right around when his opponent was starting to cramp. Yeah. And that was kind of a blessing for him, right? Because he was like, oh, this was my first match and I was starting to feel it. My team was freaking out. Yeah. And so I think that little nugget there is indicative of maybe there's a top 2% that he didn't quite have just yet this early on in the season. Can we continue to see him improve and expect that improvement? I really hope so, because after the final 2 years ago when he lost to Nadal, that was one of his worst seasons afterwards. And so I really hope we don't see a spiral from Daniil, because I think his performances are indicative of having a really good season after this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought even though he lost, I thought there were a lot of positives to take out from the run. Obviously, it will be a heartbreaker. There's no real ways about it. I mean, I'll get to the positives, but just to kind of recap the run that he had, he lost the first set of his event to Altmain, a French guy, in the first round, and then came back from 2 sets, slowed down against Ruusuvuori at about 3:30 in the morning. Then it was Felix Auger-Aliassime, who he got a pretty simple match against, but then again, the quarterfinal was a 5-setter against Hurkacz, 2-set low comeback against Zverev, then he plays a tight one against Sinner in 5 sets. So, I mean, he had a crazy tournament. I saw that he has the 3rd most match time of any player that's played so far this year, and all of the other 8 players around him have all played 2 tournaments.
Right. Exactly.
So there, that kind of defines his tournament. Against Hurkacz, she started playing aggressive right from the first return game. He was right on top of the baseline. It was strategy. He was playing smart. He was serving well. He was rushing the net, especially in the first set and the 5th set, and all the time, and it was working really effectively. And that Hurkacz Medvedev match, I don't know if you got a chance to watch it, but that one was great. Yeah, that one was crazy. And the end of the match was exciting as well. Yeah. You know, I think that he learned a lot about his fighting mentality and being able to figure it out, because to be honest, if we're talking about purely from a level perspective, Medvedev didn't find his best level throughout this tournament. I think at any point in this tournament, he didn't find his best level, which is almost a very Daniil Medvedev thing to do, to get 1 set away from winning it anyway, having played over a day on court. But, you know, I think that he found something about his game, which is that he can play more offensively, which I think he'll need to do. Sometimes it's Jannik Sinner, he ran out of legs, but like you said, if he had the intensity to keep that going, then maybe he would have kept that going. And honestly, I think he should have went for it anyway. Like you said, I didn't really understand why the defensive strategy worked better than playing aggressive at that point, especially in the 3rd set when he had a bit more energy. He should have kind of taken it, especially knowing that he didn't put away the chance against Rafa a couple of years ago. But I think that Daniil has a lot to learn from this run, and he'll you know, he's struggling from a head-to-head standpoint against a lot of the guys like Sinner, like Djokovic, like a lot of these guys, and like Alcaraz. And Djokovic isn't the most aggressive player around, but he can play aggressive when he needs to. And what Medvedev needs to do is to find a way to be aggressive himself and take that, because that's how he used to play when he started off. He had that in his back pocket, and then he decided to move back and try this out, and this started working. And I don't know. I'd like to see him try the volleys. I think he has the skills to figure out other parts of his game. He'll definitely need that to keep going. He's already had 6 major finals. It was a great run, but I mean, just heartbreaking. I hope he learns from this, because I hope he gets another hardcourt major in his bag.
Yeah, I think he will, based on the way he's playing. I mean, you took Alcaraz out at the US Open last year. He can beat these guys, and I think he has made positive improvements, and as I said, you know, demonstrated his willingness to start to weave that in. And I think we can't always expect a player to, you know, make a change and instantly be able to follow that through at all times. And I think we can agree, like with Sinner's career, why we maybe are not surprised that he's in the position that he's in now, where he's contending for Grand Slam titles, is because he's been so willing to commit to the improvement process and sort of go with this like 1 step forward, 2 step back type of approach over the last 2 years, that have now culminated in him winning a slam and having a very complete package. Of course, there's ways we can always improve as players, but you know, it took him a couple of years to kind of get to this point. And I also think over the last 8 months in particular, with him going from platform to pinpoint serve, you know, it wasn't like an instantaneous, okay, US Open slam final. It's taken him some time. So I think with Medvedev, where I have the kind of positive assumption is that he's shown the intent more so than he ever has in the past, in trying to approach the game a little bit differently and being willing to have a Djokovic type of skill set that allows him to deploy different tactics against different players. And I think it's just a matter of now being able to execute that across 5 sets, across a Grand Slam. You know, if this had been a best of 3 at a Masters, it would have been a different conversation. So I think the signs are all positive for Medvedev, and I agree with you. I want to look at it from that light. I also think he just his character and how he handled the loss, his ceremony, his speech, his press conference after the fact. I mean, I think he continues to win over fans. He's endearing, he's sincere, and he's also he's very knowledgeable and like very willing to analyze his game and kind of give those insights more so than other players would in a losing situation after a final. I mean, I think he gave nearly a 20-minute press conference, which is special. And, you know, in terms of being willing to kind of self-analyze, I think that's why he is such a good player and is in a league maybe even a little bit above Zverev at the moment, because he has this sort of intrinsic knowledge of the game, analyzes himself, and can make adjustments in real time. Whereas in that Zverev match, there was a little clip where in the second set, I think Zverev said to his dad, "Tell me what to do. I don't know what to do." And Zverev's dad said, "Go home then. If you don't know what to do, then go home." You know, and that's the type of thing of like, I think Zverev looks externally when things aren't going his way, whereas I think Medvedev is looking internally and therefore is able to make improvements, solve problems on his own, and come back from these types of deficits because he also has that core belief. And I don't think that Zverev necessarily like through that final or semifinal or got nervous, and that's why he didn't win. I think Medvedev was able to solve the puzzle, and Zverev wasn't able to then react to that, and then ran out of gas. And if you watched his press conference afterwards, his answer was, "Oh, I was feeling a bit sick. I had a fever." And it was that in itself that to me was like, yeah, you don't accept personal responsibility and you don't have this sort of internal locus of control that someone like Daniel Medvedev does have. And that's why I have confidence in him winning another major.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you look at things like that, and that's the best example of somebody, a comment that makes you believe maybe they're not cut out to win a major. And it's, I don't want to throw a player into the mix for no reason, but I would also say a guy like Tsitsipas some months ago saying, I would much rather be number one than win majors. And it's that kind of comment that you're like,
yeah,
that's not a major winning mentality. You have to win majors to be number one. That's the goal. That's the peak and the mountains. That's the mountaintop of tennis. And Medvedev has those qualities. And Tsitsipas and Zverev might win majors. I'm especially keen on Steph, but Medvedev is a guy whose mental game, his strategy, his IQ is so good on the court. And I think that he showed that in this event. I think he showed it when he came back from 2 sets, slowed down, and I think that he was impressive. But to talk about Sinner for a moment, because he was the champion of the event, and what a tournament he had, and it wasn't an easy draw. It wasn't an easy draw. I'll start from his 4th round. Karen Khachanov was playing great, and Sinner took him out in 3 sets. Khachanov was and Khachanov was, I think, a few break points away at 3-4 to break him and push it to 2 sets in the second set. And he really played some great tennis to knock him off. And then against who is the quarterfinal opponent? I'm going on blank. Rublev, and then he was down 5-1 against Andre with Andre serving up. And Sinner comes back there, and then Djokovic, and then Medvedev. That is not an easy draw. Rublev, then Djokovic, then Medvedev. Not everybody gets 3 top 5 opponents. He only lost 1 set. In that set, he had match point up on Djokovic. I mean, Sinner was impressive, as impressive comes throughout this tournament. Just hitting big, showing all the shots, showing all the stops. His serve was impeccable. That is not something that I think you or I would have said 9 months ago, I don't think. I mean, Jannik has improved in every facet he possibly could. This is a guy who 12 months ago, the last thing you would say about him is that he's complete. You would say he needs to improve the volleys. Have you seen him play doubles? You would say he needs to improve the physicality. Have you seen him in this match and this match and this match, even against Zverev at the US Open? This is a guy who said, you know what, I'm going to put my head down. I don't care about all the things I need to figure out, all the struggles I do have. Look at look at me hitting this big forehand, and he figured it out. And he got that big forehand on match point. He took the match. But it was really the fight all the way through that showed it. Any player in their first major final going against a Daniil Medvedev who's playing that well and who was net rushing and playing so great, they would have been scared out of their minds. They would have been scared off. It was 4-4 and deuce. It was 3-3 and 30-40 down for Sinner. It was a great comeback. It was a pretty quick comeback, all things considered, for the last 3 sets against Medvedev, who's playing tough. Medvedev ran out of legs, but I think everybody can give all the credit for Sinner. I love Medvedev climbing the net and congratulating Sinner and says, "Hey, you're next up," and that was awesome. One-time champions on hard courts. I think that both them will get another hard court major, and I surely hope so for Daniil. Jannik's got plenty of time, and we can also talk about the top 4 in the rankings, which are so close together, by the way. Djokovic at like 9,800 points. Carlos, just doing this from memory, Carlos at 9,200. Daniil is at around 8,700, and Jannik's at like 8,300. That is very. Those are very close top 4, and rarely do you have a top 4 that are all over 8,000 points in the rankings, which is crazy. I think that the Jannik has a good chance to even get to number 2. He's less than 1,000 points behind Carlos now. And let's see how he can climb up to Charlie, who really Carlos just ran ahead at the start of the beginning of his career, but now he's climbed back up. And I think now a lot of people, if you ask them who's going to win more majors, Jannik or Carlos, they're like, slight hesitation now. They didn't have that before. You're like, slight hesitation. So let me pose the question: what do you think of Sinner versus Carlos?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they have a really tight head-to-head and have played some really epic matches already. I think, they've known each other's game for a long time, so they're able to bring something different to the court when they play each other versus other opponents. I do think Sinner has a key that can unlock Alcaraz's game in a way that maybe other opponents can't unlock his game. I think in particular with the forehand, it answers a lot of questions from the Alcaraz end that would usually not be answered. Yeah. And I think it's hard at this stage to have a realistic conversation about Grand Slam holes by the end of their careers. But what I can say is that I would not be surprised if Sinner finished above Alcaraz this year. I think Alcaraz has a monumental task in defending the Wimbledon title. I think that is going to be challenging. And I think that for once, at this point of the year, us as tennis fans about the men's game can be super excited about the fact that things are starting to open up again, and we're talking about other folks having an opportunity and having a chance. And just because Djokovic didn't win this tournament, I don't think he's now all of a sudden too old and not going to win any majors anymore and all of that stuff. I don't think he played his best tournament. I don't think he showed his best tennis. Was he 100% healthy? Did he have an injury? We don't really know. But Djokovic is Djokovic, and I do believe he will continue to problem solve and be a problem in the slams for the rest of this year. But I do think now we're seeing Alcaraz has beaten him at a slam, Medvedev has beaten him at a slam, and Sinner has beaten him at a slam. And so we're finally poised to have some really epic battles. And I could see a situation where Sinner does finish above Carlos this year, because I do think defending that Wimbledon title and those points is going to be challenging.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I think that Sinner right now has the lead. When I enter the Sinner conversation as somebody who has been remarkably high on Jannik Sinner, almost to many doubts for a couple of years, saying that he's a multi-major champion and a future world number 1, just based on talent, even if it was ridiculous comments to make a couple of years ago, I would say Carlos and Novak are not done. They're right at the top still.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important distinction to make, to be honest. But here's what I will say. The walls aren't completely down. We're not in a new era, in my opinion, just quite yet, because Novak just has still won 4 of the last 6 biggest events. The facts are just what the facts are. But I will say that we've broken a hole in the wall to peek into what the next era is, like with Sinner and Medvedev in the final, with the kind of this is the first final played outside of the US Open to not feature a big three, to not feature Murray, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic since 2005 Australian Open, since Safin beat Hewitt. It is two guys, world number one guys, young, fantastic talents who are going to be at the top for quite a few more years. And they're playing the final. Djokovic was, I think he was pretty healthy in this event. I don't think it was like some other majors where you could point to the health, like maybe Rafa at the US Open 2022, when Ruud and Carlos reached the final. I think Novak was there for the hunt. He didn't play his best event, and Jannik took him out. And I think that you just have to look at it for what it is and see that Jannik kind of earned the victory. And I think that he earned the final, and it's very exciting for Jannik to, I don't know if leading the next generation. What I'll say is it's very exciting for Jannik and Carlos leading the next generation from their Wimbledon victories, their Australian Open victories. And despite them having different journeys to the top, with Carlos Alcaraz probably a bit of a more rush to the top, becoming the youngest world number one ever, and Jannik taking a little bit more time, trying to add more tools. Now Carlos has kind of too many tools to work with, has to kind of figure it out, his shot selection, his physical side, and just figure everything out from getting to the top so early and having all that pressure on him. Jannik's had no pressure. He's just been like, hey, I'm just cruising. Nobody's paying attention to me. They're complaining about my physicality and my serve. You know what? I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to be better than all of them. And that's what we've seen on full in front of us. And it's a good lesson, if anything else, I think that player at a very young age can deal with lots of struggles. When there's such a high-level athlete and talent like Jannik Sinner, you don't count them out, especially when they have the head on the shoulders that Jannik Sinner has. I'm thankful that I didn't have to watch another Altmaier French Open moment, that we could watch a more of a moment like this at a major where the mental game has improved in spades for Jannik.
Yeah, and also last little bit on that is he has a fantastic coach in his corner who's now coached 4 Grand Slam champions over multiple different generations, including men and women, right? So he, I think, has somebody in his camp who's ultra intelligent, has a fantastic tennis IQ, understands the value of taking your time, learning, like laying the foundations and the groundwork, because I think you bring up a good point. In Alcaraz obviously had this very meteoric rise. It was very quick, but we've said last season that there's been moments where some of his shot selection, some of his decision making has been, not questionable, but like at moments could have improved. I think we've also talked about his ability to manage his like energy levels and pace himself throughout the season has been raised question marks. And he himself said towards the end of last year, I need to figure out what to do towards the back half of the season because I get exhausted. And I think Sinner has given himself a game that is easily repeatable. It's manageable for his to last a whole season. I think he has a more sustainable style of play, and I think in the long run that will suit him very well. And I do think, the age gap is maybe 18 months, 2 years age gap, somewhere around that.
Yeah,
I do think at that age it does make a difference in terms of maturity, in terms of the learning process. So I do think Alcaraz will make adjustments. He will learn, he will add things to his repertoire. But now might be the time where we talk about Alcaraz needing to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. Maybe that's kind of a situation that he's in, whereas Sinner's done that prior to getting his slam. So everybody has a different trajectory and a different means for, getting their slams under their belt. And I think both of them are, in a really good position to lead, the younger generation into the fold as mature athletes. And as we see the Djokovic era begin to sunset, not that that's going to happen this year, but, inevitably Father Time will catch up. And so who's really going to be standing in line next? It's obviously hard to know because there's other names in the mix too, like Aruna, who we also have been expecting to kind of make it at some point. But I think these two have really now separated themselves from the rest of the pack in terms of next gen. And I do believe that we will see both of them win multiple majors across their career.
Yeah, I fully agree. I'm excited for the next era. I think their rivalry is amazing. And people are talking about a possible Sinner Alcaraz final. Carlos can complete the end, but we'll be waiting. We'll be waiting.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, and then Aryna Sabalenka is a two-time major champion, no longer the one major. She joins a long list of multiple major champions on the women's side, but not a single player outside of Venus Williams has more than 3 or 4. So we'll see how much Sabalenka can climb up. 6th consecutive major semifinal. She reaches her 3rd consecutive major final on hard court. She gets her 2nd major over Qinwen Zheng, who had a fantastic run as well, even though she didn't beat a single top 50 player in the world. She, she's a talented player, and it's probably a little bit too early for where she's at because the serve can use a lot of improvements. The shot selection, in my opinion, she's not quite there, but she had to play the players ahead in front of her, and she's a fantastic player. She plays against Sabalenka. She didn't really have much for her. Her serve, I thought, was not really there. She made about 53% of her first serves in. Sabalenka was absolutely pummeling the second serve. So it was a bit of a it was a bit of a matchup that felt a little bit lopsided, but because of how well and how mentally solid Sabalenka is now in these moments in the semifinal and finals, and very excited about Aryna's win here, getting the win over Zheng, and she also had a fantastic win in the semifinals against Coco Gauff. And that was a great match. And anyway, what did you think of the Sabalenka final?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Sabalenka just played lights out tennis this entire tournament. I think she started the year really well as well. Obviously, she had the loss to Rybakina, but other than that, her level has looked so high, so good. I think, again, like we continue this conversation of a player that's so willing to improve, put in hard work, and year on year, we see that evolution and the maturity of Sabalenka grow. And I think that, it may be a similar kind of storyline between Swiatek and Sabalenka, where Swiatek had success quick early on and now is having to kind of adjust and react to that, whereas Sabalenka's kind of been in the chasing position now for a little while. I think her losing that US Open final against Coco reignited the fire, but also reignited the belief of I can be in these finals. I am good enough, especially on hard court, to be a multiple major champion. I think her weapons on both sides, her backhand looks so strong. Her average hitting speed was like 80 miles an hour at some point during this tournament. I mean, it's up there with the fastest of the men. I think she was willing to show at times coming into the net. I mean, we saw her do that against Gauff. She missed a lot of volleys early on, but she just committed to the tactic, kept coming in, and was willing to adjust and do something different from the previous match and not get into these types of defensive rallies with Coco. And she totally took advantage of, not being in a US Open crowd type of situation and just staying totally focused on her tennis. And I think that when Sabalenka is tunnel vision and focused, it is really, really hard to beat her. And I think she just seems to be really happy too. Like, she's in a good mental headspace. I think we've all seen some really nice videos of her and her team throughout this tournament looking like they're really enjoying themselves and having a good time. I think in moments, when we watch Swiatek, she looks so stressed and almost like not happy with the responsibility of being world number one at times. She's grown into it, but I think that Sabalenka over the last year has showed that she's in a positive mental place. Obviously, a couple of years ago lost her dad, so I think that probably took its toll for a period of time that some of us didn't take into consideration at the exact moment that happened. But I mean, Zheng played a good enough final, but I think Sabalenka was just a cut above her, was experienced in this situation. I agree with you that I think Zheng got here a little bit ahead of schedule. I do believe she will get back into a slam final at some point. I think she has the weapons to. Yes, the serve can improve, but I mean, she's still a top server on the women's tour in terms of aces, in terms of speed and power that she gets on it. I think at times she showed good variety with the drop shot. She showed good kind of court awareness and positioning, and she showed some really strong athletic ability. I just don't think it was enough on the day, and wasn't well executed enough to beat Sabalenka. And you know, when you come into a slam final, if you haven't beaten a top 50 player on the way there, sometimes it's hard to kind of conjure up that mojo and that self-belief of like, yeah, I'm really meant to be here, and I'm really, you know, a contender for this title. I think sometimes that can kind of leave you with a little bit of a lack of confidence because, you know, you haven't gotten a big win under your belt on the way there. But she's a great hope for Chinese tennis. I think she's top 10 now. She's and she's going to be in and around the mix. I mean, she's so young, so I do think she'll be back.
Yeah, number 7 in the world now, which is a pretty big jump for Zheng. And I'm excited for her. I mean, she only just turned 21. I mean, she's no Mira Andreeva at this point, but she's been around since, I mean, she's been 15, 16, 17. I mean, she's been climbing up. People have known about the talent that she does bring to the tour. I felt the same. I mean, I just think that Sabalenka's was hitting the forehand so huge that it was just too much for Zheng, who honestly was hitting a lot of unforced errors, but I was glad that she came out and played her game. I felt like even though she wasn't able to pair up against the Sabalenka, I felt like she still showed the potential of why she will maybe be there when in about 3, 4, 5 years when she can get, I think, more reliable serving. And also when she can pair up on forehand, has that experience of playing a top player who hits that big in a big moment. Because also Zheng can, like, she can overpower maybe a Svitolina on her best day and have a great win. But against Sabalenka, who hits the ball so hard, to be able to dictate off of Sabalenka is even that much harder. So,
that's why I'm also a little bit, like, I guess, reserved with the unforced error count, because I do think it's all of a sudden overwhelming to hit against Sabalenka. Nobody else hits at that pace and can generate that pace off of a slow ball. I think that's the other thing. And she's so committed to that on every single shot. It's just like, you're taken aback by it. And yes, it's counted as an unforced error and you were there to hit it, but it's, you know, again, you're coming through a draw, or you haven't beaten a top 50 player. No one's even hitting within 10 miles an hour of that level of forehand at point in, point out. And all of a sudden you're asked to do that in a Grand Slam final. I just think it overwhelmed her entirely.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't think I'd ever possibly compare Medvedev to Sabalenka, but it's like Medvedev in the men's final trying to overpower Sinner. It's like, Sinner, what are you doing? This isn't how you play. This is not how you play, and you're doing it so effectively. Like, Sinner's like, get out of my face with that. On the women's side, it's like that, and Sabalenka usually plays like that, but it was you know, her backhand, I agree, was so good. It was so good in the Goff match as well. I remember it got her out of a few sticky situations as well in the 3-4 and 4-4 games where she had a few backhand winners, a great backhand winner cross court. Zheng and Sabalenka. Zheng is a great athlete. Sabalenka is a great athlete. I thought the final was really good for the way the top half kind of came apart a little bit. I thought that Zheng, at least, even if she didn't bring it as much to the final, I thought that she had the level overall to really show that she will be here in the future, and she has the potential that is so exciting anyway. And I like that Zheng, she was still like fist bumping and doing come on. I mean, she was doing her proper job of it. It was just, I felt bad for her because she didn't have anything for Sabalenka in that moment. That was
and it'll be a learning experience for her. And I firmly believe, when a draw falls apart, it's somebody's opportunity to take it with both hands and take advantage of that situation. And she did. She was the highest seed left, and she got herself to the final. And I think that's what's, really important to recognize as well, that a lot of players in that situation see a path to the final and screw it up. And she didn't. She got her way there. She deserved it. And as you say, she came out with good intention and, and played not lights out tennis by any means, but she played within herself as well as you could kind of ask her to do in that situation. Of course, we would want to see a more competitive match, but yeah, the experience factor of Sabalenka was also there. And kind of my last piece on Sabalenka is that I really think her backhand is so underrated on tour. You know, everybody thinks about her power forehand, but I actually would argue at times that her backhand is more consistent, more reliable. It gets a little bit more angle to it at times, and she just moves so well to it as well. I really think her backhand is such a weapon. And yeah, it just came up clutch in so many moments in this tournament, and I wanted to give that a little accent to finish that.
No, I mean, it's good. Next time I come up against Sabalenka, I'll hit to the forehand rather than the backhand. I think it's good.
I think you're screwed either way.
Yeah, no. Which way do I choose? Yes. But yeah, the women's event was insane. I thought the whole draw, the way that it kind of happened, it started with the kind of Rybakina and Swiatek upsets at the start, and then the way the top half kind of evaporated. It was crazy in the fourth round, the way it kind of happened. Just to like mention what the fourth round was real quick before we kind of go even to what the semifinal was. The fourth round, one of either Linda Noskova, Svitolina, Azarenka, Yastremska, Pauline, Kalinskaya, Zhang, and Dodin. One of those players, all respect to those players, one of them was going to reach a major final. And then you had Svitolina and Azarenka lose to Yastremska and Noskova. So the draw just completely kind of evaporated at the seams. But, you know, Yastremska, she was confident throughout the whole thing. She played a great ball. I mean, she won 8 matches in her run. 4 of those came in 3 sets. You know, she was hitting the big. It was a little bit all or nothing. But listen, this time it came out as all. So, I mean, it worked out well for her. And I think that, you know, it was completely different from the Emma Raducanu run. Well, first of all, Emma Raducanu reached the final, and then won the major. No qualifier had even reached the final before, but Yastremska to get to the semifinal playing Vondrousova in the first round, then a former champion, Azarenka, and to play so many close matches, I thought it was really impressive. Her mentality really impressed me. I think we'll see more of her still as she's risen up.
Yeah, I think the women's game, again, is really well poised to have a very interesting season. I think, you know, we have our kind of top contenders, our top names in Sabalenka, Gauff, Swiatek, and Rybakina. But that doesn't mean that those guys can't lose. And I think that, again, is what's exciting about women's tennis, is this unpredictability of the kind of dominant top players. Obviously, Jabeur lost early too in a very definitive fashion. And yeah, we've got major champion in Vondrousova, who I don't know what her level is going to look like this year. And then you've got other names knocking on the door, like a Svitolina, who looks like she, you know, is going to get herself inside the top 10 if she continues the level she's been at. Her fingers crossed her back injury isn't bad. But yeah, I mean, the women's game is so poised to have a fantastic season with question marks about who's going to win each major. And I'm super excited, really, actually, for the clay season for the women's, which sounds strange for me to say because I really don't love the clay season. But I think last year we had such fun with like Swiatek, Rybakina, and Sabalenka all winning titles on the clay before getting to Roland Garros. And
yeah,
obviously Rybakina was ill, but Sabalenka had much point to get into the final. And we don't know when Muchova is coming back.
right.
And so I really think that's going to be a fun part of the season for us running into Roland Garros. But obviously Sunshine Double is going to be fantastic too. So yeah, I'm stoked that the women's game has, you know, two players at the top with multiple majors, and then 2 women right behind them with 1 major apiece. And yeah, I think we're set for a really exciting season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, well, I think the questions are on Iga, but, you know, I think she's always going to show up to the clay. I think she's going to have something to prove probably in Madrid and Rome. She's like, these are my tournaments. These are my tournaments. Get off the clay. And then I think real quick, we didn't go that much over the Sabalenka versus Gauff. We went a little bit over, if you want to finish off on that one, because that was, I think it played out almost like a final. Sabalenka really had so many motivations to beat Coco after Coco beat her in a 3-set match at the U.S. Open. Sabalenka really never brought her best level at that match, and it was way better here. I mean, 6 breaks traded in the first set, and just what a win for Sabalenka, and then to go on to beat Zheng to defend her title as well. I felt like Coco on the forehand to forehand was completely overpowered. I thought Coco showed a good level throughout that match, but Coco, a lot of the forehand placements were a lot to Sabalenka's liking. Coco hit, I believe, about 32 forehands down the center of the court, 35 anywhere else on the court. And Sabalenka hit 31 of her forehands cross-court back to the forehand and just 11 down the middle. So that's a good example to show about court placement, being able to control the forehands, even when the forehand rallies are coming like ping pong, and where they're going so fast back and forth. And it's a really good stat to show that Sabalenka at this moment is able to control that forehand that much better, even when her forehand is hitting so big through the court, which is, in some ways it can help, but in other ways it's like the safety of Sabalenka's forehand is so impressive, and her backhand as well, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think both players admitted that semifinal match in a way was of a higher quality than the final at the US Open. And I think I would agree. I think that the execution on both ends was there more consistently. And in particular with Gauff, she played a pretty horrible quarterfinal match against Kostyuk. That was some really ugly tennis. And so I had some big question marks for her going into that semi of like, she cannot play like that again, because she will get bageled if she plays like that. And she didn't. Yeah. So kudos to her, because it's not easy to play a bad match like that and come out against the player that you just played a Grand Slam final against, with that level of pressure, and to come out and play a good match. I think she pushed Sabalenka in moments, but I agree with you. I think that the forehand wasn't able to ask enough questions of Sabalenka to really kind of put her under pressure and make her feel uncomfortable. And this time around, the athleticism and movement of Gauff just wasn't, able to dig her out, because I also think that Sabalenka played a little bit more of a consistent ball. Like, she still hit big shots, but she had slightly bigger targets. Whereas in the second set at the US Open, I felt like, or third set even, I felt like she was like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to hit it harder and harder and harder. And it just started missing a lot. Whereas this time around, it was more precise, more consistent, and executed on the power at the right moments, as opposed to just sort of unleashing at all times. And so I think that's why it was a higher quality match. And I do think Coco will have answers to that in time. Again, she has got Brad Gilbert in her camp. I think he's a phenomenal coach. So I think her game will continue to evolve. We forget still that she's 5 years younger than Sabalenka. So she's got a lot of time to improve and learn. And she'll certainly be winning more majors, in my opinion. I just think that semifinal was a culmination of Sabalenka's best work. And that's why it was such a good match.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that Coco lifted her level, but still wasn't enough for Sabalenka. Even though the backhand was good, the forehand still needs a little bit of improvements, but everything outside of the forehand is at a top level, and even the forehand has improved a little bit. So I'm excited to see Coco still move on from here. But what a run from Sabalenka. Last point. Do you, if you were to predict Sabalenka at the moment, do you think she's going to win a couple more majors over the next couple of years?
Yes, I do. I think she got to the semifinal and final of every slam last year. Here she is defending her first Grand Slam title. I think that's hard to do. Not many players have been able to do that. As you said, Venus is probably one of the only active ones left that has defended their maiden major title. Or I think she was able to win like back-to-back first majors. So slightly different stat. Mm-hmm. But I do think people continue to have question marks for Sabalenka coming into this Australian Open of like, she's going to get nervous and she's not going to be able to defend her title. It's too difficult. I had this sort of quiet confidence in me that she would be able to do that. And that confidence continues to brew, because I think that she just has weapons on, both sides of the courts. Her serve is great, and there's room for improvement. And knowing her mentality and her approach to the game, I think she will continue to add elements like coming to the net more, that will continue to make it more and more difficult to beat her. So I do think we will see her winning at least a few more major titles. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the big question is the hurdles at the semifinal and the finals, and if she's completely gone over that. I think the Australian Open was a good sign of it. I'd be more ready to say yes when I see a run at another major. but I think that she is she's definitely in fantastic position. This tournament, not losing a set, even playing Goff in the semis, I think really improved my confidence in her. But I want to see a run at another major before I say she'll win, say 2-3 more. But I think that I think that she's a player to watch now, and she does have big weapons. I'm interested to see, though. I think the women's at the top has great competition. I don't really know what happened with Pegula and Jabeur in this tournament, but I think that with Osaka coming back, with Mira Andreeva, who's an alien at 16 or whatever she is, playing as well she does, and then also Rybakina and Swiatek, and it's going to be tough, but yeah, I mean, at this point, it seems very likely she wins at least one more. If that one comes outside of Australian Open, I'll be happy to say that I think she'll win a couple more after that as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on Osaka too, because I would really like to see that matchup when Osaka starts, regaining her best level. Hopefully she does, because I think that will be an ultimate showcase of women's power tennis and would be so good for the women's game. So I'm really hopeful we'll see that in the future too.
I agree. I hope so. Because Osaka was a big miss to the tour. I'd also love to see Wozniacki and Kerber do something, who are much older, but I would love to see that.
I think it will be harder for them, to be honest with you, because I think that movement is still so good, and I think they'll be able to push a certain type of player. But when it comes to beating these top 4 names that are in and around the mix, I do think they're gonna struggle because they have found ways to unlock the tactics and skills needed to beat the movement of a Kerber or Wozniacki, and the power is just so extreme coming from a Sabalenka racket. I don't see them having quite the same impact, but obviously still happy to see him back.
Yeah, well, I agree. Okay, a little bit of a sad I agree, but I agree. All right, so for the weekly power rankings, this is the power rankings that follows the Australian Open event. We both have Jannik Sinner now at the number 1 spot. Djokovic is not at number 1. He drops back to 3 in both of our lists. Medvedev is at number 2. Actually, we have the same top 4, and then I just switched Hurkacz. Hurkacz at number 5. You have Hurkacz at 6. You have Alcaraz at number 5. And then I have Fritz there at number 6 because I thought he played a really good match against Djokovic, to be honest. I thought that, he lost in 4 sets, but, I think maybe Sinner would like to have a small thanks to Dino Prismic, Popyrin, and Fritz for pushing Djokovic to 4 hours in their matches, before that semifinal. Because Fritz really tested Djokovic. First time in Djokovic's entire career, actually, that he went 0 for 15 on breakpoint chances. So that was a big stat for Fritz, and Fritz really moved up to save him. So I want to shout out Fritz. Alcaraz is going to be back, but at the moment, this is power rankings, which means the players who are doing best at the moment. So he's dropped down. Then I have Rublev, then I have de Minaur, and then I have Khachanov. All right, give me your list, because I think it's pretty similar, though.
It is pretty similar. Like, I think Alcaraz, he didn't play his best match against Zverev. Some questionable kind of decision making, didn't get going totally in that match. I do think it's his first tournament of the season. I think we will continue to see him as a contender. Hurkacz played a great quarter against Medvedev. I think that Hurkacz in best of 5 is just a little bit weak in moments, maybe mentally, just sort of handing the experience to Medvedev in that match there, but really pushed him the whole way. So don't really have much negative to say about him. Rublev, I also thought, played a good tournament, showed some good resilience. I'd agree with you. I thought Fritz had a good performance against Djokovic and showed that, he was willing to adjust and have a better performance against someone that's beaten him 8 times in a row and wasn't intimidated by that, and played some of his best tennis. I also think just in general in this tournament played some of his best tennis. So it was just the movement of my other guys that pushed him down one.
Yeah. I think it was like the top 8 are all very strong there. It's not, you're not going to look at any of them and be like, that one's weaker, or that one doesn't deserve to be in the top. Like,
right.
It's like Rublev was strong. He had a good performance against Demon, and then Sinner was just Sinner, and then so I understand.
Yeah, and I probably should have de Minaur in my my top 10. I guess Tsitsipas. I wasn't discouraged by his level at this tournament. I think I said the same last week. You know, I thought he showed glimpses of a high level again, and I'm hopeful that he's going to have a better season. I'm not his biggest fan, so that's unusual for me to say I'm hopeful, but I think that he's in and around the mix. And when I think about, maybe next week, if we want to say next week, de Minaur is probably the better pick. If I'm looking at it with a slightly wider lens, then I would think Tsitsipas is going to work his way back into the mix.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I thought the Steph one was weird just because he lost, I think, in the third round, but he's showing a better level. I probably wouldn't include him in top 10 just because I did like Demon and Kyrene so much, but in this tournament. But yeah, I mean, Steph is going to find it again. I mean, he's a perennial top 10 player. He even managed to hang on to the top 10 this week. He was so close to dropping out. I think, can't remember who it was, but somebody was close to dropping Steph out. And if he fell out, then that would be the first time since early 2019. So he's going to be around for a while still. And then on the women's side, Sabalenka, Goff stay the same for me. Yu Jung got 3. I had Jung got 4 for Noskova, who I was just really enjoying before the kind of quarterfinals. But Zhang moves up, and then also number 6, I have Svitolina. I decided to put Svitolina in there for the power rankings because she retired in her match against Linda Noskova, but she was playing very good tennis. Reached the final of Auckland as well, lost to Goff, but she's playing great tennis against Coco. Then I have Konskaya, Kostyuk. Then I have Krejcikova, kind of the quarterfinalist of the Australian Open. And then I have Iga there at number 10 because it would be a darn shame to not have Iga in there, especially after a win against Collins. What did you?
Yeah, look, I honestly struggled with the WTA power rankings because this tournament was so topsy-turvy, and seeing names that we're not used to seeing progress so far into the tournament. And so I don't know how, realistically, how many of these players are going to follow that up with a great run over the next 2 weeks. One name that I do feel pretty confident in is Noskova. I do think she's going to be in and around the mix this year. I do think that Krejcikova is always in and around the mix when it comes to, getting a couple titles each season. She had a good run in the Middle East last year. I think she beat Swiatek in the final. So, I think she's a name that we continue to kind of see slide around in this power ranking space. I had Svitolina in my power rankings last week, but I'm not sure with her back injury if she's really going to be playing over the next couple of weeks. I would suppose that she might take some rest. So that's why I threw Swiatek and Rybakina back in the mix. I mean, I thought Rybakina showed a great level coming into the Australian Open and beat Sabalenka in the final. Where was it, in Brisbane? Yeah. So Anna Blinkova is a good player and was due a big win, and so such tight circumstances. I do think we'll see Rybakina continue to play well over the next couple of weeks, and similar thoughts about Swiatek.
Do you think if Rybakina had converted one of her 6 or 7 match points, we would have had a completely different Australian Open in that Blinkova match?
I do think it could have looked quite different.
It's all what ifs.
It's what ifs. But I do think Blinkova, a lot of people might not have known her name, which is understandable, but she is a very good player, and she's just not been in and around the mix because of injuries. But I think that she, again, as I said, was due a big win, and it just came against Rybakina at this time. Yeah. But I don't think that loss in itself is indicative of Rybakina not having good performance over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, there's the power rankings. Sabalenka and Sinner at number 1. Do you want to get into the upcoming, which is kind of the upcoming tournaments and all of that?
Yes.
Upcoming section.
Yes. So on the WTA side, we have a 500 event going on right now in Linz. Big names that are in the mix there are Ostapenko, Mertens, Vekic, Alexandrova. Alexandrova needs to get her season rolling. She's had a couple unfortunate losses. Also towards the end of last year, had a couple of losses that were like raising eyebrows when we really thought she was a name that was going to start pushing into the top 10 consistently and kind of be a contender at least 500 tournaments and master tournaments as well. So she's really going to be looking to get her way back into some form. But there's some other good names in that mix in that Linz tournament as well. Camila Giorgi lost, so she was also in. Then we have Katie Bolter, Jodie Burrage, so some other kind of good names that are playing there. And then we also have a 250 tournament in Thailand where Badosa is trying to get some match time under her belt. So is Tomljanovic, but she already lost. She got bageled in the seconds. That's an unfortunate start for her. The top seed there is Lynette, who retired, I think, at the Australian Open with an injury. So she wasn't, again, she might be trying to play herself into some form. And then we've got the youngster Anfita Vitora, who's also going to be there amongst some other names as well. So an interesting kind of two little tournaments there. Obviously, a 500 is a big opportunity for players that didn't make it deep in the slam to kind of start getting some points. And I do think Ostapenko is in a good position to take advantage of that and has been playing some really good tennis. And, you know, has gotten herself back into the top 10. Honestly, she probably should have been in my power rankings now that I'm thinking about it.
Because, she probably should have made mine as well against Azarenka. She lost Azarenka in Brisbane. She lost Azarenka at the Australian Open. As long as she's not playing Azarenka, apparently she can beat just about anybody. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Ostapenko's been a name that maybe we forget about because she won a major and then she's gone away and been top 30, top 20. But over the last, I think, 6 months, has started to show a good level. You know, she beat Swiatek at the US Open last year. She made a decent run here at the Australian Open. She got a doubles title on the way and a singles title on the way. So, you know, she solidified her place inside the top 10. And I do think we'll see a good performance from her. So, regrettably, not in my power rankings, but probably will be next week. And then on the ATP side, we've got a 250 in France that has Runa, Chorich, Felix Auger-Aliassime, Shapovalov, Bublik, and Benoit Paire back in action.
Yeah, Paire who beat Murray today, as
well. Yeah. So some fun big names in a little tournament there in France, and should be interesting to see some of these guys again playing themselves into form. I think Auger-Aliassime is facing. I said his name wrong last week. Cazaux.
Arthur Cazaux, yeah.
Cazaux, in the next round. So that should be an interesting match, given that Cazaux had a good run at the Australian Open.
Yeah.
And then we also have some Davis Cup qualifying that's starting to come up, but a couple more 250 tournaments starting the week of February 5th. So we will cover that for you guys on the next pod.
Yeah, and a few younger names in there too with Felix and Runa and Cazaux. I mean, Runa is way higher ranked than everybody else in that event. But it's going to be interesting to see because he lost early to Arthur Cazaux in that Australian Open tournament. So everybody saw Jannik Sinner win the Australian Open. They're like, hey, could be my turn next. And they're going to be looking to take that spot up. Even Felix, he's like, you know what? You forgot about me. But listen, I'm still here. I'm going to try to rise up, but especially Alcaraz and Runa. What's up?
Yeah, I said, are you though, Felix?
Yeah. We'll see. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys joining in for this episode of Tennis 360. I've been Anthony Hirsch.
I'm Eliza Westgate.
And I appreciate you guys joining in. Don't forget to like the podcast if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe as well. If you enjoyed it as well, I'll see you guys at the next one.